And I'm an alcoholic. Welcome to the Big Book Study Workshop. We will be keeping everyone muted for the duration of the workshop with the exception of the facilitators, unfortunately. Tony.R, Joe C, and myself, Joanne C. This is not a conventional AA meeting where we share our experience, strength, and hope with each other. This is a Big Book Study Workshop, the purpose of which is to take members of AA through the program of recovery as it's laid out in our basic text, Alcoholics Anonymous, or more commonly known as the Big Book. We will not be referencing any other literature or versions of the 12 steps. Our aim is to help educate and challenge your beliefs about the program of recovery, so we might sift through some of the inaccuracies that circulate within our fellowship. Our aim is to challenge current beliefs by comparing them to what our basic text says. We simply wish to educate those who want to know more about the program of recovery. Feel free at any time to ask questions in the Zoom chat feature. We will try to periodically answer any relevant questions as we go along. Also, Tony will ask questions about some of the information we've just reviewed in the book. And when he asks those questions, the intention is for you to answer those questions in the chat. Anyone behaving inappropriately or abusive will be removed from the workshop, and you will not be permitted to return. So keep it loving and tolerant. Tony?
Right on. Well, I was going to get Joe involved there, but he disappeared again. I'm a recovered alcoholic. My name's Tony. Sobriety date's April 8, 1989. I'm pretty impressed with that. I don't know if anybody else is. Doesn't really matter, but that's the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous. They call that a phenomena, an unexplainable event, right? Like how I'm sober this long is still mind-boggling to me. Tomorrow's a big day for me. I kind of reflected in a lot of gratitude for the people that went before us and the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I get the pleasure of sponsoring a lot of people and walking shoulder to shoulder. And this is our basic manual. And I've been studying it now in depth for a little over 30 years. Somebody took me through it 31 years ago. And I go through a new book probably every 3 years. Like there's some really remarkable stuff in here. I don't take a lot of I used to listen to a lot of speakers and kind of just go with their idea of it, or people in the fellowship and go with their idea of it, thinking that's exactly what represented the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, until somebody actually took me through it. And I kind of realized a lot of times the fellowship's idea of what's in the program, what's actually in the program is two different things. We hear a lot of different things in our fellowship, and a lot of people think, oh, that's gospel, or that's part of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's fact-based information because this person said it, or there's more than one person saying it. And a lot of it's really moved away from even some mainline speakers, like some really big circuit speakers are really moving farther and farther away from the basic text of Alcoholics Anonymous. People are more interested in being politically correct or generically entertaining than actually carrying the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. So we've covered in great detail where we're at. There is a solution. So we're going to get Joanne to start off and hit some highlights to where we're at. We're at page 23, and we're looking at the second symptom of alcoholism, which is really funny. Last week we had 260 people. As soon as we mentioned what the book says is the second symptom of alcoholism, we lost 70 people. So, we all have an open mind until we hear something that doesn't agree with our thinking. We're very funny people. We do book-based information. So you're not arguing with us, you're arguing with the book. This is what the book says. And the hardest part about that is reformulating our ideas based on Big Book program recovery, sobriety, right? So anyways, Joanne, you want to hit us up?
Why don't we get Joe to start us off with a set-aside prayer so we're all got our heads where they should be. Joe?
Yeah, I'd love to do that. Everybody, this prayer, what it is intended to do is to help you keep an open mind, help you to have a new experience, and to bring God into it before you bring your own thinking mind into it. How it goes is, dear God, please set aside everything I think I know about myself, this book, my illness, these steps, and especially about you, dear God, so that I might have an open mind and a new experience with all these things. Please help me to see the truth.
Right on.
Yeah.
Joanne?
Hey, sorry, I got a phone call there.
Oh, we'll wait. Don't mind us. No, go ahead.
everyone. My name is Joanne. I'm still an alcoholic. I think we are 4 Big Book Study workshops online in. We've been through the preface, through the forewords. We've been through the doctor's opinion. We've also been through Bill's story, and we got into a little bit of There Is a Solution last week. Maybe not quite as far as we would have liked to. So what we'll do now is a very quick overview of some of the information we've covered out of the basic text so far. A little note, if you're just joining us for the first time and you find that we're going a bit quick, it's because we're reviewing information we've already been through. So like Joe said, the talks are available through the YouTube channel. Use one of these email addresses that's being posted in the chat to request the worksheets. You can use the chats and the worksheets to get yourself up to date. You can also email us if you have any questions while you're filling out those sheets. So no need to sweat it if you feel like we're going a bit fast. We're just reviewing information we've already done. So our first page is Alcoholics Anonymous, challenging one of the common misconceptions that alcoholics don't recover. It says here right on page 1, the story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. Also highlighting that the most important bit of information on that page is the story of, that we're actually going to go through some detailed information on how it is that these people recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. The preface establishes what type of book we're studying. It's not a novel, it's not a work of fiction, it's a basic text to outline our program of recovery, saying specifically, therefore, the first portion of this volume describing the AA recovery program. So for the purposes of this workshop, when we refer to the program, we are always referring to the first portion of the big book, or our basic text, Alcoholics Anonymous. Forward to the first edition establishes who these people are and why it is we might be interested in anything they have to say. They say we of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. To show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. For them, we hope these pages will prove so convincing that no further authentication will be necessary.
So get everybody in the chat to answer that question. What is the main purpose of this book for those that are following along? Just answer it in the chat as Joanne keeps on going.
We think this account of our experiences will help everyone to better understand the alcoholic. So now we know that we have over 100 men and women who have recovered from what they refer to as a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. Assuming that this is the only information we have about Alcoholics Anonymous up until this point, we realize that we don't really understand what it is they mean by seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. And the next chapter, being the doctor's opinion, begins to educate us on what it is they meant by that. The doctor himself, why we might care what he has to say, he introduces himself in the very first paragraph on page XXV, entitled The Doctor's Opinion, stating that he is, we of Alcoholics Anonymous believe that the reader will be interested in the medical estimate of the plan of recovery described in this book. Convincing testimony must surely come from medical men who have had experience with the sufferings of our members and have witnessed our return to health. A well-known doctor, chief physician at a nationally prominent hospital specializing in alcoholic and drug addiction, gave Alcoholics Anonymous this letter. So here they're establishing that we realize that what they have to say would mean very little unless it's actually backed up by somebody, not just any doctor, but a doctor, a chief physician at a nationally prominent hospital specializing in the treatment of alcoholics and drug addicts. So we know who he is and why we might actually care what he has to say or what his opinion is.
And the second question is, in the doctor's opinion, is what did he say that we all had in common? What was the one thing he said that we all had in common? And what symptom are they referring to?
You want everybody to answer that in the chat?
Yeah, on the chat.
Yeah.
Yep.
Majority of people are saying the allergy.
Awesome. Okay, did you want to add anything further?
Whoever's saying the allergy is correct.
Yeah, the allergy is correct.
Good.
Joe, do you want to hit some highlights in the doctor's opinion quick?
Just about to, yeah, okay. Doctor's opinion. What he's getting down to is basically out of his own experience and the sufferings of these alcoholics, these types. He's gone on to say this type. So he's very specific about the type. And the type that John was just talking about on XXV is the type that can never safely use in any form at all. Once having formed the habit and found they cannot break it, their reliance upon human things, the problems pile up and become astonishingly difficult to solve. So it alludes to a little bit of the mental states, but it's also this allergies progress to the point where they can't stop themselves when they start to drink. Their problems pile up on them. Do you ever notice in your own individual lives that your life starts revolving around the drink? Right? And then, you get a letter in the mail and it's your TELUS bill or whatever your provider is, and you're going to deal with it maybe in a couple weeks. Then you open that drawer again, and then it's a stack like this, and then they start calling you, asking you for your money or their money, but you don't want to give them that money because you think it's still your money. And these things just keep on going, right? Frothy emotional appeal. So your bills are a frothy emotional appeal, right? The thing about your loved one saying, hey, can you please stop? Even Bill had that experience, and if we recap what Bill said, what I wouldn't do to make amends to my wife, right? How many people here are show of hands, what you wouldn't do for family or loved ones or children, but you found it impossible, right? So we talk about that. So what I really love is this frosh in the same page, frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices. The message which can interest and hold these alcoholic people must have depth and weight. In nearly all cases, their ideals must be grounded in a power greater than themselves if they are to recreate their lives. The individual has to come to believe that they suffer from this allergy. If the individual doesn't believe they have this, then how are they going to be in adopting another idea? And we read on the first page that Bill acquired certain ideas, right? He's seen his hopelessness and futility sitting at the table drinking with Ebby. Ebby came and presented him what? New ideas. Bill saw in his friend that they were working for him. Bill then said, okay, what is this thing? Ebby goes on to explain it. Bill says, or Ebby, it was upon a foundation of complete willingness, I might build what I saw in my friend. This didn't originate in Bill. None of it did. None of it originated in Ebby. None of it originated in Roland Hazard. These ideas were shown or given to them, right? Once adopted, their ideals became grounded in a power greater than themselves. Came to see that my hopelessness and futility is life, and we've been living it, and there's a solution, what we're going to be getting into. Then they became willing to adopt these new ideas that we're trying to present to you. The step one promises is that if I have this allergy and this malady, I'm doomed in alcoholic death inevitably. That's why we get a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition, stay of execution from the illness. Right?
Yeah.
So then we go to XXIX, and here's a little hope for you. It says, on the other hand, and strange as this may seem to those who do not understand, once a psychic change has occurred, the very same person who seemed doomed, who had so many problems he despaired of ever solving them, suddenly finds himself easily able to control his desire for alcohol. The only effort necessary being that required to follow a few simple rules. And what it tells you in the above is that unless this person can experience that psychic change, their fate is that it's going to happen over and over. And what's going to happen? Relapse. Continue to drink. Without this power, what we come to believe is I have no power. I lack the power sufficient enough to change my life suitable to not have those problems that are despairing me. Not my human resources marshaled by the will are failing. No human power, all these other things. Once an individual can come to believe that, then the only requirement necessary is to do as, like Bill came to believe, was do as my friend did. And then I would have these things, right? And that's what we're going to be hitting on tonight. Tony?
Right on. So we see when we start this thing, John was saying about the story. So we see a bit of the highlights of the story. But the thread idea going through there is what creates the story. Right? And so as we went through the doctor's opinion, we see the physical part of our illness. The first symptom in alcoholism is the physical allergy, that once they take a drink, then it triggers the phenomenon of craving. And that creates a story within itself. And as the result of that, a lot of people come to with a firm resolution not to drink again because of the consequences associated with the allergy. Most people think they're an alcoholic because of the consequences. And then we see we'll always have consequences because of the allergy. if you can't control and enjoy your drinking, you'll continue to have consequences and end up in all those things. Nobody here has experienced consequences, eh? Any show of hands, anybody ever experienced consequences? That's what we think the problem is. Is there a way I could drink without consequence? Now we find out there's not a way we could drink without consequence. And the one thing that we all have in common, right, when they talk in the doctors, but all these many others have one thing in common. We said that. That's the physical allergy. It's not the character traits of the human thing that makes us all the same, even though we have the human experience, is the allergy. And then he went on to say, these certain types of people seem moral psychology, and Joe and Joanne were alluding to that, is that these people have to experience a certain thing in order for them to recreate their lives. Anybody know what that is? That the doctor says these certain types of alcoholics, moral psychology, an approach that he did in his facility didn't work for these certain types, and there's only one thing that would save them from themselves if they're going to recreate their lives. And then he gave 2 examples of people who has experienced this thing. What's this thing that he's talking about? You can put that in the chat. So we see the base of the conversation happening here. And then we get into Bill. We got 2 people who are of the type that the entire... so we see in Bill's story that it's a bigger story of the 2 examples that he gave in the doctor's opinion. So as we went through Bill's story, we've seen somewhat the story of somebody who's afflicted with alcoholism. So here's some questions to go with that. So Bill, knowing his situation, was it able to stop him from drinking again? And that's a yes or no, right? And the answer was no. So Bill, the second time in treatment, when he did his surrender, when he did his acceptance, when he did his complete defeat, when he hit bottom, was that enough to recreate his life? Again, we see the answer is no. And then when he had much knowledge about himself, why did he say he relapsed the second time after leaving treatment? We see fear kept him sober for a bit, and then we see he relapsed, but he knew why he relapsed. Was it because the obsession came back or the insanity came back? We see it was the insanity because he had no idea. In his story, he talked about somebody pushed a drink his way and he took it. Was I crazy? He even started questioning his own sanity around the first drink. Like there was no defense whatsoever against it. So now when we get into there is a solution, we're going to expand on those ideas. Why did he keep on taking the first drink? So on page 23, where they talk about that, 22, we'll kind of start from here and go through it. And what it starts, it's self-explanatory. And we'll be able to, by 7:30, finish this off on page 29. And we're going to hammer some points here. Keep an open mind. We're saying what the book says. We're not saying what, these treatment centers say, these circuit speakers say. We're saying what the book says. This is it. We're getting back to the basics, right? And when somebody took me through these basics 31 years ago, I've been sober ever since, right? So there's got to be something to this. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. And they talk about being armed with facts, right? So, Joanne, you want to hit us up here? Perhaps we'll never fully... Oh, before we start, they talk about we need to find a common language that we could all agree on, right? And so where would this common language be that we could all agree on, that they agreed on, that they were going to pass forward to the generations or people who are still coming to the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous? Where's the terminology and the language we would use as a fellowship in order to help other people as our primary purpose? Where would this language be?
You want them to answer that?
Yeah, where would these ideas of carrying this message be? Where would we learn the terminology so there wouldn't be confusion about carrying this message and working with new people? Our first tradition says our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends upon a unity. So we see a unity formulating in the basic text of our manual, right? Okay, Joanne, hit us up.
So the bottom of page 22, this is where we left off last Thursday. We're going to just recover the new portion that we went over. We know that while the alcoholic keeps away from drink, as he may do for months or years, he reacts much like other men. We are equally positive that once he takes alcohol, whatever, into his system, something happens both in the bodily and mental sense, which makes it virtually impossible for him to stop. The experience of any alcoholic will abundantly confirm this. These observations would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink.
So do you actually need a drink to be an alcoholic? Can you be an alcoholic without drinking?
You want them to answer that?
Yeah. Can you be an alcoholic without drinking?
Oh, we got a lot of yeses.
We got a lot of confusion.
So if I never drank, would I be able to diagnose myself as an alcoholic? Yes or no?
A lot of people saying yeah.
So
No.
then you got to go back to the common language because it's confusing. There's so many different ideas here. So they're saying here is what's the first symptom in alcoholism? Is the allergy. So in order for me to be an alcoholic, would I have to have the allergy? And
Let's hear it, folks.
And what's the only way to know I have the allergy? I need to drink. How many 12-step fellowships are there out there? Hundreds, because they suffer from the human condition, that they found some form of solution to treat that. What did we find to treat our human condition? We found alcohol to bring about a sense of ease and comfort, which later Bill talked about was like a boomerang and almost cut them to ribbons. How many people's drinking or alcoholism has defeated them? What brought you here to your knees? Drinking or thinking? Drinking.
There's another way of putting it as well. I know many people who suffer from the human condition. They have problems, they have challenges, they have issues. That doesn't make them alcoholic. There's one thing that stands us apart from the rest of people as a unique entity, and that's straight out of the doctor's opinion. Yeah. And that's the phenomenon of craving. That's the allergy. And you can't know if you suffer from that unless you have actually had a drink and experienced it firsthand.
Or, and the book suggested too, if you want, go step over to the nearest bar and try some controlled drinking, and then try to stop abruptly. We doubt if you have this that you'll be able to. And that's what they're getting at, right?
Yeah, so it's all about drinking, right? That's what makes you an alcoholic. Because if you could control your drinking, you just had emotional problems, then go get some therapy and you'd still be able to drink. How many people were hoping that was the case? I got a little disposition in life. I go for a bit of therapy, maybe some Valium treatment, and then I'll be able to have a drink.
We've got a good question here.
Yeah.
What about the obsession of the mind?
Have we got there yet?
No.
Okay, so let's go with what we're talking about here. So let's finish this up about the drinking part. Because if you drink and it causes you a problem, what's the most important thing you need to do in order for it not to cause you a problem? You need not to drink. Everybody agreed on that?
Well, they say, he says in the doctor's opinion, that the only solution we have for the allergy is complete abstinence. And if that worked for real alcoholics, that would be the extent of the program of recovery. Just don't drink. Enjoy the rest of your life and find something better to do with your time.
That's all the book would say, yeah.
It'd be a one pamphlet book.
Yeah.
One side, you have a problem, just don't do it. Sorry, go ahead. Okay, go ahead, light us up.
So, obviously, there must be an additional problem. If the solution to the allergy is to just not drink, why would we still be having this discussion? Why would the book carry on in the way that it does? Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than in his body. If you ask him why he started on the last bender, the chances are he will offer you any one of 100 alibis. Sometimes these excuses have a certain plausibility, but none of them really make sense in the light of the havoc an alcoholic's drinking bout creates. They sound like the philosophy of the man who, having a headache, beats himself on the head with a hammer so that he can't feel the ache. If you draw this fallacious reasoning to the attention of an alcoholic, he will laugh it off or become irritated and refuse to talk. Once in a while, he may tell the truth. And the truth, strange to say, is usually that he has no more idea why he took that first drink than you have.
So they're starting a new conversation, right? They started, if we never took a drink, we'd never trigger the allergy, never end up in trouble. We all agreed on that on page 22. So we're not talking about the allergy anymore because we already know it triggers the phenomenon of craving, right? So now they started a new conversation that the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind, not in the parking lot. Centers in his mind. and he can't see, feeling. So now they've got to explain it in a way that makes sense to people who exhibit this symptom, or maybe those who are dealing with people of alcoholics, right? They're saying this problem centers in the mind, and they really don't know why they do these things, right?
It's not doing push-ups somewhere?
No. Yeah.
Some drinkers have excuses with which they are satisfied part of the time. But in their hearts, they really do not know why they do it. Once this malady has a real hold, they are a baffled lot.
So what did they call this condition of the mind? Is it the obsession here or the malady?
Let's see what they say, guys. Let's see. Malady. Yeah, we're
So this symptom is in reference to the second symptom in alcoholism. That's the problem of the alcoholic. Is it not? And it says that in the book here, that there's this thing that's happening in their mind beyond their ability to see, feel, and touch, and they're kind of baffled at this thing continuously happening. So when you looked up the word malady, what did it kind of describe in the dictionary back in this era when they wrote this, Joanne?
Malady. Synonyms, antonyms. Okay, in addition...
So synonym is not the same thing as a... Meaning. I didn't know that. I used to have a thesaurus, is that what it's called? And I thought all those words meant the same thing. Thesaurus is not the same as the meaning of it. I have a street education. While you guys were getting educated, I was working on membership, so you got to bear with me. I learned how to read in AA and how to talk, so I was very limited back then. So what does it mean, Joanne?
Ailment, bug, complaint, complication, condition, disease, disorder, distemper, fever, illness, infirmity, sickness, or trouble. Recent examples. So an example would be, in addition to unclogging the plumbing of the nation's financial system, the U.S. Federal Reserve struck a blow against a persistent malady. So it means the improper function of something.
Or I got the 1935 definition here. So back when they were talking about it, a malady is an illness. A malady as such that keeps you home sick in bed for days, or something that causes you to have trouble or to suffer.
So what they're saying is it's really hard to define, but we need to find a way to explain it for those who suffer from it and those who have it. So there's the idea. There's this condition of the mind, and it centers in there, and it keeps on presenting itself. Did it show up in Bill's story? So we see we're starting to build on that idea that the doctor talked about it as being this desire. A lot of people go, well, the doctor did this interview way back and he talked about it being the obsession. The reason he talked on an interview at the public level, he had to say really generically, really in a way that it didn't insult or repel people who were afflicted with this. Imagine him saying, yeah, these alcoholics types seem to suffer from a malady, a mental illness that centers in their mind, and when they take a drink, how many people would have came to AA with that basis? Or how many people that known you would have went, yeah, see, I told you there's something matter with you psychologically. That's why the doctor talked about it did not satisfy us to be told we're maladjusted, full-fledged from reality, or downright mental defectives. These things were true to some extent, but extremely true with Joe and Joanne. Go ahead, Joanne.
So your fastest definition for the word malady is disordered condition. And if you replace the word malady, you'd be disordered condition of the mind, right?
You want to hear the Latin definition of malady?
Is it funny?
Well, so it would be where we get it. It's the exact root of what the word actually means. And it comes from the meaning malady. And then that means bad, ill, to have hold of. It's like something really bad that is holding you, such as this. So, and that's what it means in the Latin, to have a hold of.
So that would make sense. So I don't have alcoholism. Alcoholism has me.
That's right.
Big difference. If you have an ailment, it has you. You don't have it. Yeah. So they're saying here, once this malady has a real hold, they're a baffled lot. Why are they baffled? Because of this malady and the inability to stay sober for months or years. Right? Okay, Joanne?
There is the obsession that somehow, someday they will beat the game, but they often suspect they are down for the count.
So this is the first time they use the word obsession in the book, and it's in regards to what? What is the obsession in regards to here? And if you look at what we're reading, it explains it. So why are we baffled? Because we can't get sober and stay sober. Why do we keep drinking? Again, they're saying because there's this malady that centers in our mind, right? That we keep on taking this drink, triggering the allergy, and this is repeated over and over and over that the doctor talked about, and Bill was an example of that. So here they're saying the obsession is that this time it's going to be different. This time I mean it. Last time or this time, like I've done some singular circular act that based on me, I'm able to stay sober now. Anybody have that obsession in sobriety here? This time it's going to be different. I'm really mean it this time. This time. I really mean it. I'm going to surrender. I hit bottom. There's some singular act that I've accomplished with inside of me allowing me to stay sober. I don't think about it.
Answer that in the chat. If you've experienced what Tony is just describing, answer it. Yes, in the chat.
How many people have been obsessed here with keeping themselves sober? Not only keeping yourself sober, how many people have been obsessed with the idea of you keeping you sober? How many people obsessed with themselves here and what they're going to do and blah, blah, blah. 11 years in and out. This time it's different because I never understood the melody. So the first obsession that really needs to be smashed is the idea that I have this thing. This thing has me. True or false? Okay, let's read on.
Is there going to be more sound effects? Because if there is, I'm excited.
We're just getting started. I had a bit of sun today, so we're in trouble.
But they often suspect they are down for the count. How true this is, few realize in a vague way their families and friends sense these drinkers are abnormal.
Except the drinker, right? We're always like, what?
What'd I do? But everybody hopefully awaits the day when the sufferer will rouse himself from his lethargy and assert his power of will.
To do what? Exert your power of will to do what?
To stay sober.
Not take the first drink. How many people tried that here? Just no matter what, I'm under any and all conditions, I'm going to stay sober. If you're able to do that, then you're really not one of us. Right? Because if you can stay sober, how many people here have been able to stay sober under any and all conditions and then celebrate with a 24-hour chip? You did a great job last time. Yes, I did. Almost 3 years again this time. Here's your 24-hour chip. Good job. Let's do it again. Yes, let's do it again. Sorry. Told you. Okay, let's go. We're going to be dropping soon here. Okay, go ahead.
The tragic truth is that if the man be a real alcoholic, the unhappy day may not arrive.
So what would they classify as real here is both symptoms, the malady and the allergy, this condition of the mind that has them baffled, right? And able to get months or years of sobriety, but always returning to drink again. That's why later we find out it's a daily reprieve from this condition. Go ahead.
Tony, I just want to make a quick disclaimer. If you guys don't understand certain words like baffled, malady, grab a dictionary as we're going through this, because the reason why those words are in the book is to add that depth and weight, to give you the true meaning of what we're trying to present to you. Because I see some of you having, mentioning certain things and not really getting the understanding. So again, go through with it with the dictionary, please. It's only for your best interest. So
that's actually a really good question for everybody. When the book refers to a real alcoholic, what are they stating there? What would make somebody a real alcoholic? You guys go ahead and answer in the chat as we read along.
And what's really interesting is most people, including myself, would put ideas down based on my own thinking that somebody taught me, not what the book actually says. So now we've gone through what the book actually says. So I have two ideas: what the book's saying and what I got taught. Right? So somewhere, something along the line, I have to conform my thinking to what's being taught if I'm going to be of the same type as them, to have the same understanding. Go ahead.
We got some people saying the ism, the internal spiritual malady. Got a few of those.
Okay, have we covered this spiritual malady thing?
No.
And have they said it's one of the symptoms in alcoholism?
No.
Okay, so we're looking at the second symptom in alcoholism, and we're going to look at the characteristic. The book says what it looks like for people who have it. So we need to get an understanding of this malady, what it looks like, this thing that centers in their mind that makes them a real alcoholic. So they're going to build on this building block now, because they already said, if I never took the first drink, I never trigger the allergy. So that's not the problem anymore. There's another problem that I really need to understand for the solution to make sense. And I need to be very clear on what that is. And the book is very clear on what that is, because if I don't understand what that is, then any solution will make sense and it'll lead to my own demise.
Can I add one thing? For those of you that answered allergy and malady, you are correct. And for those that didn't, if you want to ask any of those people, for help, ask them. Go ahead. Okay, thanks.
So the tragic truth is that if the man be a real alcoholic, and now we know that means that if he's a real alcoholic, it means that he's exhibiting both these symptoms, both the allergy and the malady that centers in the mind. He has lost control. At a certain point in the drinking of every alcoholic, he passes into a state where the most powerful desire to stop drinking is of absolutely no avail. This tragic situation has already arrived in practically every case long before it is suspected.
So by the time I realized there's a problem, that problem's been there a long time. When I look back, I realize, holy smokes, this thing has had me, and I've kind of been able to navigate it or kind of prolong it, but it got to a place where it started getting worse and worse and worse. Never better. Anybody's relapse here getting better. Always worse, never. Why? Because of the allergy and the malady, the inability to keep me sober under any and all conditions. 360 meetings in 90 days. 4 12 and 12 studies. 11 years in and out. Why? Because of the malady. It makes sense now. Not the spiritual malady, the malady that centers in my mind. Now it's got my attention. Where do we get this understanding from? From them. We have the same understanding as everybody that went before us. Not only the first 100 men and women, since thousands. It's this common language that we're going to pass on to our sponsees so we don't mislead and kill them. Right? Because if we start getting this fluff talk that's happening in our fellowship, who pays? Not the person who has a little bit of a drinking problem. The real alcoholic is unable to get sober based on all these ideas being presented in the fellowship as the program that are not book-based or backed up within this book. That's why you get certain speakers that start saying, well, you don't have to drink to be an alcoholic. And then you hear a whole bunch of people who are uneducated say, oh, yeah, that makes sense. And they start thinking their emotions or their trauma or their life is what created them to be an alcoholic. Well, then what that means is that I'll deal with all these things. I'll start feeling better. And then I'll think I'll be able to drink safely again.
So I just want to address something that's being brought up repeatedly in the chat in regards to our third tradition, which states the only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking. That is absolutely true. Nobody has to declare themselves a real alcoholic to be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. All that is required is a strong desire to stop drinking. But if you come to Alcoholics Anonymous and you attend meetings, you declare yourself a member of this fellowship, and you find you continue to drink, you may be suffering from alcoholism, meaning that meetings and simply being a member of the fellowship is not sufficient enough to bring about recovery from alcoholism. So we're not saying that anybody who doesn't declare themselves a real alcoholic doesn't have the right to be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous in any way, shape, or form. What we are attempting to do here is help people establish whether they are one of us or not.
See, that's interesting. See how fast conversations go? We're talking some basic information in the book. We're not even really we're just starting the conversation, and right away, defense, argument, and rebuttals. Right? Instead of saying, well, this is what it's saying. This is what alcoholism is. This is the characteristics of people who suffer from it. Nobody says you had to. We're getting educated on what it is. Whether you have this or not, you're still getting educated. Those who are real alcoholics or those who are alcoholics, you need to know what type of alcoholic. This is the beginning of a conversation. It's not finalized yet. They're going to expand on all these areas. So if you've already started arguing, you forgot the third, the set-aside prayer. What you're defending an idea that's not based on anything. And that's our biggest challenge, is to be open-minded enough to hear what's being presented out of the book. Okay, Joanne?
most of the questions surrounding the third tradition were valid questions.
Yep, 100%.
So the next bit of writing on page 24, we're on page 24 for those who need to get up to date, is in italic. And remember, we got started at the beginning of the workshop a couple weeks ago. We mentioned that anything mentioned in italic font is usually some sort of important principle that they want to make sure they drive home. The fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. We are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. We are without defense against the first drink.
And they're going to explain what they mean by that. So they'll follow that idea up or that thought up or the italics with an example of what they're talking about. They never ask you, well, what do you think we mean? They're going to tell you what they mean by it. They're going to give you an example of the characteristic, what that looks like in a person who exhibits it.
The almost certain consequences that follow taking even a glass of beer do not crowd into the mind to deter us.
Was that in Bill's story? Did Bill
Yes.
exhibit that? How many people here has exhibited that in the past? How many people after they took the drink go, what the hell am I doing? I'm not supposed to be drinking. Right?
If these thoughts occur, they are hazy and readily supplanted with the old threadbare idea that this time we shall handle ourselves like other people. There is a complete failure of the kind of defense that keeps one from putting his hand on a hot stove. The alcoholic may say to himself in the most casual way, it won't burn me this time, so here's how. Or perhaps he doesn't think at all. How often have some of us begun to drink in this nonchalant way, and after the third or fourth pounded on the bar and said to ourselves, for God's sake, how did I ever get started again?
Anybody here?
Only to have that thought supplanted by, well, I'll stop with the sixth drink. Or what's the use anyhow? When this sort of thinking is fully established...
Okay, who counted drinks? I can't remember counting drinks. Like counting, if I'm going to have 2 drinks, then I poured bigger shots. Anybody here get a bigger glass? Like, I remember doing that once. I don't know what I thought about I'm only going to have a couple shots. I held the shot glass over the glass as I was pouring, and it was on a bit of an angle, right? Anyways, I needed some help back then. Okay, go ahead.
When this sort of thinking is fully established in an individual with alcoholic tendencies, he has probably placed himself beyond human aid.
Wow. So
and
what,
unless locked up, may die or go permanently insane.
So what do they say has placed these types of people beyond human aid? Remember, it talked about earlier, most alcoholics have this characteristic of the malady. A lot of alcoholics will have, what's the one symptom that we all have all in common?
You want them to answer?
It's the allergy, right? Now, how far along you are in the illness will determine these characteristics of what? Not being able to choose whether you drink or not at certain times. Well, how do I know if I have that? I look back in my drinking history. You know what? I got 3 months, I got 5 years, I got 6 years, I got 2 weeks. I kept on drinking again. Nobody like that in here? So what's the characteristic that makes these types of people beyond human aid? So write down in the chat, if somebody says, hey, when in step 1, when they admitted they were powerless over alcohol, what made them powerless over alcohol? Or it's the same question, what made them beyond human aid? What symptom makes somebody beyond human aid? Okay?
You want to keep going?
Oh, yeah.
These stark and ugly facts have been confirmed by legions of alcoholics throughout history. But for the grace of God, there would have been thousands more convincing demonstrations. So many want to stop but cannot. There is a solution. Almost none of us like the self-searching, the leveling of pride, the confession of shortcomings, which the process requires for its successful consummation. But we saw that it really worked in others, and we had come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as we had been living it. When therefore we were approached by those in whom the problem had been solved, there was nothing left for us but to pick up the simple kit of spiritual tools laid at our feet.
And we call that 12-step work. As the result, we carry this message. That's the message those guys carried to Ebby in the jail cell when they spend the sentence. That's the message they carried to Bill. That's the message Bill carried to Bob. That's the message that the doctor allowed Bill to start working in his facility upon his third treatment. Started allowing other people to work, carried this message, because these people had not only the experience of the illness, but they had the experience of the recovery and the course of action that allowed them to experience this thing, right?
We have found much of heaven, and we have been rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence, of which we had not even dreamed. The great fact is just this, and nothing less, that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences. And here there's a small asterisk next to spiritual experiences. And if you go down to the bottom of the page, it says fully explained in Appendix 2. Do we want to go to Appendix 2?
Nope.
Okay.
We'll do that next week.
Which have revolutionized our whole attitude toward life, toward our fellows, and toward God's universe. The central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. He has commenced to accomplish those things for us which we could never do by ourselves. If you are seriously alcoholic as we were, we believe there is no middle-of-the-road solution. We were in a position where life was becoming impossible, and if we had passed into the region from which there is no return through human aid, was
that thinking, right? The malady through human aid, including yourself, that not even you can create this shift or change necessary, regardless, no matter how great the necessity or the wish, the promises or desperateness. That gift of desperation is absolutely useless without a solution that we apply to our lives. Because people give you this idea that this gift of desperation is going to change everything. Well, then it would have changed in Bill. A lot of us have that gift of desperation. Why would you come to AA unless there was no other place to go? Anybody? How many people was this on your bucket list, junior kindergarten? I can't wait to go to an AA meeting. Right? Like, we end up here because there's no other place to go. So they're saying here we have two alternatives.
We have but two alternatives. One was to go on to the bitter end.
What step is that? Oh, sorry.
One was to go on to the bitter end. What step is that? You want them to answer?
Yeah, what step is that? Two alternatives.
When they say one was to go on to the bitter end, what step are they talking about? Blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we could, and the other, to accept spiritual help.
And what step is that? So we see they're talking about steps 1 and 2. The problem and the solution to that problem is spiritual help that they talked about above the page of those who approached us with this spiritual toolkit that they laid at our feet, that they had the experience of applying it to their life, the experience of applying it to their life. They've had this profound change in their own life in order to secure, like Bill did, in order to allow them to experience, to get through the rough spots. They put this recipe into practice, right? What saved the day for Bill? This recipe. When all else fails, he carried this message to the next suffering alcoholic. Bill hadn't experienced the third time in treatment. He didn't have those previous experiences the first other 2 times in treatment. So through the course of action, so the alternative is, what's an alternative? Is you don't make, it's like as the result. So even though I make the decision to go this way, it's as the result of this course of action. I need to be on this road as an alternative, right? So what that kind of means is if my GPS has me going in a certain direction and that road is going to lead to my demise, and somebody says, well, take this cutoff here, but it says that my GPS says go this way, which is the malady keeps on bringing me back to that first drink. And they're saying, hey, well, you're coming up to this exit here. If you take this other alternative, this other road, it'll get you to the life you've always dreamed and hoped for, and you will no longer be suffering from or the ailment that's killing you. You'll find safe passage. So as you start on that road, your GPS will still be trying to recalculate or get you to do a U-turn to go back the other way. As you start going along that road, which we understand is from 3 to 12, somewhere along the line, the GPS will shift and have you going in a new direction. As the result of this new course of action or this alternative route, I found a new happiness and new freedom that they talked about at top of the page. Just because I see the exit doesn't mean I'm there. I need to get on that route as an alternative route. Does that kind of make sense? That's what they're saying here. I'm already afflicted with alcoholism. I'm already dying as the result of alcoholism. Right? So I see I'm experiencing this thing as the result of alcoholism. In order to experience what we just read earlier, I need to get on that route as the result of these things, not the knowledge of these things. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, this we did because we honestly wanted to, and we're willing to make the effort. A certain American businessman...
So we're going to jump right down to this guy who can't get sober, and he talks about, so he returns to the doctor. How many people have come to AA, looked to change their life, relapsed, and then spent some time away from AA, and then came back to AA? Anybody here? Nobody here? Anybody ever have that story here? Or how many people has tried to get sober before AA, right, to recreate their lives and found they ended up drinking again? Anybody here? So we see we've had experienced relapse. You hear people say, relapse doesn't have to be a part of your story. Yes, it does. It does. Because if you never experienced relapse and you're able to stay sober, you wouldn't come to AA, would you?
Well, I think the added point to that is if you're running around with untreated alcoholism, that's the result of untreated alcoholism, is the strong desire to stop and the inability to do so. Some of our alcoholic readers, this is over on page 27, guys. We're skipping ahead.
No, let's go. So we return to the doctor. Let's go. I like the second conversation on page 26. Sorry.
That's okay. So he returned to the doctor, whom he admired, and asked him point blank why he could not recover. He wished above all things to regain self-control. He seemed quite rational and well-balanced with respect to other problems, yet he had no control whatever over alcohol. Why was this? He begged the doctor to tell him the whole truth, and he got it. In the doctor's judgment, he was utterly hopeless. He could never regain his position in society, and he would have to place himself under lock and key or hire a bodyguard if he expected to live long. That was the great physician's opinion. But this man still lives and is a free man. He does not need a bodyguard, nor is he confined. He can go anywhere on this earth where other free men may go, without disaster.
So they're giving an example of what they talked about on a previous page here, two alternatives. We see the first alternative here is he was going to go on to the bitter end, right? That was a great physician's observations or diagnosis of this guy. He was going to die, right? And then it says, but as the result of this alternative, he seems to be living a free man. Why is that? Right? So they're going to build on those ideas. Go ahead.
Some of our alcoholic readers may think they can do without spiritual help. Let us tell you the rest of the conversation our friend had with his doctor. The doctor said, you have the mind of a chronic alcoholic.
Okay, so, Joe, ask everybody, what makes somebody have the mind of a chronic alcoholic? What is the characteristic that determines somebody to have the mind of a chronic? So now they're specifying the second symptom, the mind of a chronic alcoholic. Chronic, what does chronic mean, Joe?
Repeat it over and over.
Repeat offender. Right? Something keeps on happening against their own will or their own desires or their own hopes or efforts. Something, you have the mind.
You could say once this malady has a real hold, they're a baffled lot.
Yeah, right? So they're saying they're revisiting this thing that happens in the characteristic. They're trying to explain this malady, right? They're trying to say this is what it looks like. And those who've experienced it start going, yeah, I've experienced that. I'm trying to explain that to my wife. She don't get it. She goes, what do you mean you spent 11 years in and out of the fellowship of AA? Yeah, I said, she goes, what's the most amount of time you ever got? I said, 16 months. She goes, why that? Says, I nearly killed a guy in a bar fight. She goes, oh, you're going to stay with AA, right? No. See, when I tell her every time I relapse and how horrific my story's gotten, she's baffled at the idea that I would even return to drinking again. It doesn't make any sense to her. And it doesn't make any sense to me. Does it make any sense to anybody here? It's like this characteristic is kind of like, we have the mind of a chronic alcoholic, okay?
You have the mind of a chronic alcoholic. I have never seen one single case recover where that state of mind existed to the extent that it does in you.
And Dr. Silkworth talked about that. These types of people were beyond their reach. How many people, so people who go through treatment or some form of therapy, it works for 90% of the people that go to the treatment centers. But most of these types here, they go to a treatment center, they get all this knowledge and all these ideas and behavior modification, and they're working on themselves, they leave treatment and relapse. And they're baffled at the idea, and they go back again and go back again. That's why if treatment worked, they wouldn't keep a file on you, would there? Sorry, go ahead.
Our friend felt as though the gates of hell had closed on him with a clang. He said to the doctor, "Is there no exception?" "Yes," replied the doctor, "there is. Exceptions to cases such as yours have been occurring since early times. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what are called vital spiritual experiences."
And what did Dr. Silkworth call that?
An entire psychic change.
So, because if they would have started with spiritual experience back then, most of us would stop reading the book. Show of hands?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So you see, they're building this conversation up. Now, if you have this thing, I'm a little interested in what you guys are talking about here. And the hopelessness of this guy, he felt like the gates of hell had closed down on him. If you're experiencing this in your life, you're open to any solution that's being offered here. Like Bill sitting at the kitchen table, listen to Ebby. Right now, okay, I'll listen to what you guys got to say now because my life's on the line, right? But as long as I think I can do it, would I be listening to this solution here? Okay.
Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what are called vital spiritual experiences. To me, these occurrences are a phenomena. They appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which were once the guiding forces of the lives of these men, are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begins to dominate them. In fact, I have been trying to produce some such emotional rearrangement within you. With many individuals, the methods which I have employed are successful, but I have never been successful with an alcoholic of your description.
What's the description? They've described alcoholism. So what's the description that makes them alcoholic or beyond human aid or suffer from alcoholism? We see again, he reiterates, there's only two things, the mind and the body. There's not all these other things. The solution is even a phenomenon to him. It's a spiritual approach that seems to do the impossible. Even this doctor calls it a phenomenon. It's really an unexplainable event, but we'll give you characteristics or show you what it looks like, which they've done so far. This is what it kind of looks like, or the characteristics or how it exhibits itself in people like this who have experienced it. So when they say and how it works, if you want what we have, well, what is this thing? Is this rearrangement and being able to find a solution to the human dilemma. And as the result of this psychic change or spiritual experience, I'm no longer afflicted with alcoholism. I'm still alcoholic, but I'm no longer have an alcoholic mind. That'll get some gears going. Okay. Go ahead, Joy.
Upon hearing this, our friend was somewhat relieved, for he reflected that, after all, he was a good church member. This hope, however, was destroyed by the doctors telling him that while his religious convictions were very good, in his case, they did not spell the necessary vital spiritual experience.
So,
and just wait. For the second time in 2 pages, they're saying, for amplification, please see Appendix 2. I'm thinking Appendix 2 might contain some important info.
100%. A big part of what happens when I work with people like Joanne and Joe and people who've been around in and out for a while, what happens is people go right to the God card, thinking I got God, like I did that all. That's what I thought the solution was, get God. So I'll go back to church, do all this stuff, surrender, got God, reading the Bible, praying, and I think I got this now. But they're saying here, that's not exactly the whole thing. There's something a little more to this that we need to undergo to have this experience. Because if that was it, then Bill would have, most of us wouldn't end up in the trouble we do. So most people, which is, we'll get into later and cause some problems with this, if you're working with people, you don't start off with telling them, find your own conception of God. You need to explain the problem before you explain the solution. And it's not your understanding, it's our understanding that you need to understand in order to get our solution. Most people don't know what that is. So this guy don't know our solution, does he? He thinks he has a solution because he has a belief in God, and he's going to go right to that. So what is he missing is our understanding of what we mean by power greater than us or God or this solution. You need to understand what we mean by that in order to achieve or work toward obtaining it.
They need to know the story.
Yeah. I had fun there. Oh, we lost 20 people there. That's good. Okay, go ahead.
Not bad. You're slipping. You're slipping.
Well, I'm trying to be nicer, right?
Well, it must be your old age. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I just turned 58, everybody, yesterday. I know, look great for 58, eh? Yeah. You're supposed to go, no. No, go ahead.
You're doing that. They're just muted. Here was the terrible dilemma in which our friend found himself when he had the extraordinary experience, which, as we have already told you, made him a free man. We, in our turn, sought the same escape with all the desperation of drowning men. What seemed at first a flimsy reed has proved to be the loving and powerful hand of God. A new life has been given us, or, if you prefer, a design for living that really works.
What's a flimsy reed?
Something that's not, well, you mean literally?
Well, what do they mean by that? What seemed at first a flimsy reed?
It didn't seem overly strong, but it was enough to grasp onto.
What do you get from that, Joe?
What seemed a flimsy reed?
Yeah. What at first seemed a flimsy reed.
Well, what a reed means, look how it's spelled. R-E-E-D. A reed means, it's not reed, we're not talking about the book here. A flimsy reed means a long piece of grass. What seemed a flimsy reed just blowing in the wind with no structure, no foundation, right? Has proved to be the loving, powerful hand of God. What are you guys smiling about? What's so funny?
Well, that's I like the way you study this thing because, you know, like years we go through, I've always read it as read. Like I used to think it was a flimsy reed, like the book. You read it through, it's like, But then when you look at if you miss the meaning
like
or the words.
Man, it's like Zeus standing on the heavens with the freaking lightning bolt saying, this is what it is. It ain't no flimsy reed. It's powerful, baby. Like that? Fired up, baby.
Yeah. What's your sobriety date, Joe?
October 29, 2017. And still new. Yeah.
Okay. Mute him. He's on a roll. No, okay, go ahead. Keep going. That's awesome, buddy. I love your compassion.
Love you.
Boom!
Listen, the next line is a distinguished American psychologist, which clearly Joe needs.
Yeah, go ahead.
The distinguished American psychologist William James, in his book Varieties of Religious Experience, indicates a multitude of ways in which men have discovered God. We have no desire to convince anyone that there is only one way by which faith can be acquired. If what we have learned and felt and means anything at all, it means that all of us, whatever our race, creed, or color, are the children of a living creator with whom we may form a relationship upon simple and understandable terms as soon as we are willing and honest enough to try. Those having religious affiliations will find there is nothing disturbing to their beliefs or ceremonies. There is no friction among us over such matters. Except when Joe gets fired up.
No, it's see what that's saying is that we all have done something to have a collective experience. How each individual has experienced it was the same. What they call it or what it is personal to them is personal to them, and we're going to get into that. But they all believe that this was the way out. And now in 17, that's where, if you go to 17, the tremendous fact is we found a way out, a common solution. It means we're all in agreement. There's no debate. There's no arguing. If all of us on this page right now all said, if this course of action was it, that recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of body to give us a new attitude and a new relationship, everyone would be saying yes because we would have done it as outlined here and we would all know what we're talking about. And that's why the mixed ideas has come down from what people think it is rather than doing what's outlined here.
And that kind of goes with that thing, and you're going to qualify this. There's certain things that pick up speed in the fellowship, and it's kind of like people say, well, my understanding, well, for me, my God, and they say, and then they qualify it where I'm a Buddhist, I'm a Christian, and they start getting into this, their idea of what that means to them is none of our business, what your personal convictions are in that. At the basis of it, they're saying here what we have collectively is an experience of what this thing is, right? So we could all sit and talk about the way it was explained to me, if you had different people from around the world or different relationships, men with men, women with women, and heterosexual, all these different people relating. Then you had a Roman Catholic, a Baptist, Nazarene, all these people sitting around the table, and they started talking about their idea of relationships. How do you think that conversation would go? It'd break out into all hell in a short period of time. But if they talked about what are the basics that make a relationship, they could all have a conversation on that and wouldn't interfere with anybody. So what happens is I have an Apple phone and someone have a Samsung phone. We start getting into, well, my Samsung, my Apple, well, for me, my phone. No, collectively, this is how cell phones work. This is the basis of cell phones. If I kind of held the phone up and I was plugging at the bottom, everybody would know I need a connection or a power. They would give me an outlet to where I could plug into this thing. The basis of the understanding of the fundamentals are the same no matter what type of phone you have. And that's what they're saying here. They're going to qualify that in the next statement. Sorry?
Well, and then that's why the steps are designed the way they're designed. They're summarized to produce that experience.
Go ahead,
right?
John. You want to chime in on there, Joanne?
No. Do you want me to keep reading?
Yeah, so they're going to... So now they're getting it. No friction. So no matter where you are, Islamic, Baptist, Pentecostal, no belief whatsoever, right? Your own conviction or your own understanding around that is really none of our business. But we need to find a basic language where we could all talk about for us, not for me. Me. Well, that's the problem. You. Get in with us. So imagine if the first 100 men, women, or thousands that were all sitting around the table, would they all be talking collectively of the experience they got through this course of action?
Yeah.
Would they all have the same understanding and fundamental discussion around that? What the problem is, what the solution is in the course of action that they took in order to experience for them their personal relationship with this power that created the change. So when we talk at that basis, it's not for me, it's for us. This is what we found. And if you want what we have, then you need to understand what we have. It's not Burger King sobriety. You can't have it your way and expect to get what we got. If you're doing it your way, then don't complain. My program, well, I can tell it's your program by the way that you're looking on your face, right? But if you want what we have, this is not your program, it's our program that's laid out in here. This is our basic text. It's not for me, it's not mine, it's ours collectively. I get to experience this thing as the result of doing this course of action they laid out, which is tried, tested, and true. Anyways, I had a moment there. I'm back. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Are you good?
Yeah, don't get me started.
We think it no concern of ours what religious bodies our members identify themselves with as individuals.
What does that mean? It's no concern of ours. It's none of our business whether you're Buddhist. You hear people, I'm a Buddhist, I'm a Christian. So what happens is you start saying, I got people say, I'm a Buddhist, I believe. I don't. And then I said, well, as a Christian, now we're getting into a debate in the meeting.
Yeah. So,
it's none of my business.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. I'm a strong belief individual with my family. I've never mentioned my personal convictions around that, but the basis of it is I've tapped into power, I've tapped into source, I have the same experience. My job is to take you through this course of action so you can have your own experience. And where that gets you is entirely between you and a creator or power or source or this course of action. 31 years later, it's not my job to sell you where I'm at. It's to get you to your own experience with this. What that kind of looks like is everybody sits around talking about how they're spending their money and the great life they've had. Well, tell me how to get the money and I'll figure out how to spend it. Does that kind of make sense? So we're saying here, we're going to show you how to get this thing so you can experience for yourself, so we could all have the same conversation. So it's really none of our business.
This should be an entirely personal affair, which each one decides for himself in the light of past associations or his present choice. Not all of us join religious bodies, but most of us favor such memberships. In the following chapter, there appears an explanation of alcoholism as we understand it.
So that's who understands it.
We, meaning the first 100 men and women.
Yeah, so it's not, they haven't asked you, have they asked you yet, what do you think?
Nowhere in the book does it ever ask you that.
Have they said figure it out yet?
No.
So they use that, look at the wording, as we understand it. Where else do they use that idea, as we understand it?
Third step.
And also the 11th step.
11th step.
As we understand it. So we all have a fundamental idea of this thing. It's the same for all of us. And you know what a lot of the atheists go, it's the same thing even for the atheist. Everybody. It's this thing deep down within that becomes personal to us. It's that voice that talks to you. Our more religious members call it a God consciousness when we get into that. It's the shifting of your energy and ideas where you're not the primary focus of you fixing you. Anyways, I had my moment there. Go. In the following chapter, what is it? As we understand it.
In the following chapter, there appears an explanation of alcoholism as we understand it. Then a chapter addressed to the agnostic. Many who once were in this class are now among our members. Surprisingly enough, we find such convictions no great obstacle to a spiritual experience.
I love that.
What was that, Joe?
I said I love that.
I love that too. Further on, clear-cut directions are given showing how we recovered. These are followed by 42 personal experiences.
Further on, that doesn't mean now, well, we're looking at steps 1 and 2. You mean there's no recovery in steps 1 and 2? Is that what you're saying?
Is it what I'm saying personally?
Well, you said it. It must be you. No. So you hear people say stuff.
Yes, that's what the book is saying.
That's what the book's. So the book's saying what we're gathering is information to make a decision later. We're finding out what they mean by the problem, what they mean by the solution, and the course of action they took. And I need to make a conscious decision whether I need to carry on with that. So that means I could do step 1 every day. That means nothing has changed. Who was an example of that sitting at the kitchen table drinking? Bill. And then they talked about the solution. I could know what the solution is. Step 2 is the solution to step 1. Step 2 is not my relationship with God. Step 2 is the course of action to bring about the psychic change or spiritual experience. It's a course of action that I need to go through. So what that kind of means is if you have a problem with your car, you know there's a problem with it, but you're not too sure what it is. You bring it to the garage and they diagnose it. They say, oh, this is the problem based on the symptoms you were talking about. This is the problem with your car. So you're sitting there now and you have the mechanic's list of everything that's the matter with your car after they're diagnosing it. And you agree, yes, based on the character or the symptoms that it exhibits, this sounds exactly right. What has changed? So you could admit that, accept it, and surrender to it, and get back in your car, and has the car changed?
No.
No, but the drivers are still a little delusional on what fixes it, right? Maladjusted, full-fledged from reality, downright mental defectives, based on ideas that are not grounded in something other than themselves, right? Other than themselves. So what happens is then the mechanic will go, you know what, Tony, based on the problem with your car, here's the solution and everything we need to do to fix that. We're going to do this, and this is how much it will cost. And as the result of this course of action, your car will be back to new. You will no longer have this problem anymore. But you need to maintain certain ideas so this problem doesn't come back. Do you want us to fix this or not? Fix what? All these things that were necessary, which is from 3 to 12, hypothetically. And as the result of this mechanic's approach to fixing this problem, then the change will happen. So now I know what steps 1 is and step 2 is. What's changed? Nothing. Except now I know what the problem is and I know what the solution is. I have 2 alternatives now. Either junk the car or keep driving it the way it is or get it fixed. through a course of action. And as the result or the alternative through this course of action, it'll fix the problem that I agreed to. Okay, Joanne?
Further on, clear-cut directions are given showing how we recovered. These are followed by 42 personal experiences. Each individual in the personal stories describes in his own language and from his own point of view the way he established his relationship with God. These give a fair cross-section of our membership and a clear-cut idea of what has actually happened in their lives. We hope no one will consider these self-revealing accounts in bad taste. Our hope is that many alcoholic men and women desperately in need will see these pages, and we believe that it is only by fully disclosing ourselves and our problems that they will be persuaded to say, yes, I am one of them too. I must have this thing.
So, Joe, when they say, yes, I'm one of them too, so what does that mean? Yes, I'm one of those. So what would I be looking for? What would establish whether I'm one of those two?
I'd be someone suffering from both those symptoms that we have just described in these first couple of chapters here. That I suffer from this alcoholism, the inability to keep myself from picking up a drink, the inability to keep myself sober, right? Yes, I'm one of these people that are suffering from this and there is no solution. I must have this thing because I see that I can't go on. I can either go on, like you alluded to already, Tony, to the bitter end, blotting it out, or I can accept spiritual help. I'm already on a collision course with the inevitable, and that's doomed an alcoholic death. But now I'm being presented to this based off, and what they say here is, go have a look, go have a read, right? If you're new to this thing, and instead of somebody trying to jam this down your throat, they'd say, go have a read, go do some investigating yourself, and go see. Go read some of those 42 personal stories. And the back of our preface actually tells you to go do that too. It says, go have a read. And once somebody showed me that, I said, yes, I'm one of them. I must have this thing, and that's what's got me sitting here today.
So, Joanne, when they talk about in the doctor's opinion here, Roman numeral XXX, because we hear a lot of people talk about alcoholism as all these emotional thinking, all these behaviors, all these things that make me alcoholic. I do this because I'm alcoholic. I was alcoholic before I drank because I had these emotional problems or these traumas and all these other things where I was raised, all this stuff makes me alcoholic. So in the doctor's opinion, when he talks about the classification of alcoholics, right, seem most difficult, and he talks about all these different characteristics of the human traits, right? Because when you listen to me, if we had to identify with the human traits, a lot of us wouldn't like, because I was like I didn't identify with most people in here. But when they talk about here, what was this one thing that they all had in common that we could all kind of agree on? Or the character trait that says, yes, I seem to have this characteristic or this symptom.
All the others, one symptom, they cannot start drinking without developing the phenomenon of craving. This phenomenon, as we have suggested, may be the manifestation of an allergy, which differentiates these people and sets them apart as a distinct entity. It has never been, by any treatment with which we are familiar, permanently eradicated. The only relief we have to suggest is entire abstinence.
So that makes sense. So we see all these type of human dilemmas here. So if we had to identify with one of these, we see that these are the human characteristics. But what all these people had in common was not all these human traits. It was the phenomenon of craving. That's what they all had in common, right?
He actually says, leading into that statement, the classification of alcoholics seems most difficult and in much detail is outside the scope of this book. He's actually saying that the book would serve no purpose if we suddenly went into chapters upon chapters upon chapters of describing the many different personalities. The message of depth and weight starts with the first symptom of alcoholism because that's what we all have in common as alcoholics.
Yeah, so I didn't learn how to lie because I was an alcoholic or I suffered from alcoholism before I drank. No, I learned how to lie because it's a human trait. I was a liar, right? Right? Or, I stole cars when I was younger because I was such an alcoholic. No, I was a thief. or I did this, or I did that, or I was such a bully in junior kindergarten. I got kicked out of junior kindergarten for splitting a guy's chin open with a chair, and I became a custody ward at 8.5, and like I had some human, emotional, severe psychological problem based on where I was raised and the things that happened to me and the trauma. I go, oh, that's what makes me alcoholic. Well, so that means if none of that stuff happened to me, and I was born, what they call here is the upper end. I was born in the lower end of Sudbury, Toronto, on the streets of Toronto, Parkdale, Etobicoke. So you're saying if I was born in the British properties, right, and I had the best education in the world, when I took a drink, I wouldn't be an alcoholic then? Is that what you're saying? If I was raised somewhere else and had a different experience with my life, then I wouldn't be alcoholic. Is that what you're saying?
Actually, you can look at that from a different perspective as well. You're actually suggesting that the circumstances we live in and the traumas we suffer as a child dictate whether we're alcoholic or not. That would mean anybody who's ever been abused or traumatized in any way, shape, or form are alcoholic. And they're not. Many people come out of really deplorable situations of their childhood and don't come out of it with alcoholism. It exasperates the problem, but it's not the cause of it.
And you hear people say, oh, I had the depths of loneliness. You ever look at kids or teenagers? Most of them have that separation they don't feel a part of. Most human beings have that when they have low self-esteem, whatever the situation may be, they don't feel a part. They have that awkwardness about them. They learn how to work through it. You teach them how to work through it. They become more social. Even they have that awkwardness. I know a lot of adults that when they're in front of people or they go to events, they still have that awkwardness about them, but they didn't solve it by taking a drink, right? They didn't have all the promises come true. A profound alteration in attitude and outlook as the result of their drinking. Right? So the one symptom that we all have in common that makes somebody an alcoholic is what?
The allergy.
The allergy. So if you don't have the allergy, but you have all the behavioral problems and you have all the emotional problems, but you don't have the allergy and you've had a terrible life and trauma and all this other stuff, and you're able to control your drinking, are you alcoholic?
No.
So there's only one thing that makes you alcoholic. That's why you go to Alcoholics Anonymous. If you had a problem with eating, you'd go to an eating disorder place. If you had a problem with gambling, you'd go to a gambling place. If you had a problem with sex, you'd go to another meeting. No, I mean, you'd go to... Sorry, did I say that out loud? You'd go to a fellowship that's designed to work on that specific problem that you use as a solution to your human problem, right? That brought about some form of delusion of change or happiness or something, some form of escape that ended up causing you problems. Anybody have other problems other than alcohol?
Yes.
But we apply these solutions to it because it's a way of life that answered all our problems. Because it's the human dilemma that's our problem that we used alcohol to solve. Anybody have that story here? So it's interesting. So do you want to do a recap, Joe? What do you want to do? We got 6 minutes left, according to Joanna. I would have said 5, but Joanna would have corrected me. Type A personality. Go ahead, Joe. What you want to do? Some house cleaning up, and then Joanna, did you want to talk about the 7th tradition?
Yeah, Joe, you want to go first?
What do you want me to do?
Well, the sheets. People want to get caught up, need a little extra help.
Yeah, we're getting to that. Okay, so everybody who's here, we've got a bunch of different methods on how you can get involved here. We have the worksheets, which me and a few of my guys and Joanne we're pumping out our emails if you want to get involved through the sheets. We also have the sheets available in our YouTube channel, and that's Tony.R Vancouver, and you can subscribe. You can go to the About section on the channel, and we have the PDF format of the sheets. We also have an email there, bookbasedrecovery@gmail.com, that you could send request help or guidance. Also, for those who are doing the sheets, you can email us back just the summary page, and we can help guide you and direct you whether or not you're following along properly. Because a lot of people have been asking me, like, how do I know I'm doing these right? And send back the summary pages. There's a summary page in the first booklet and the second booklet. Send that back to us. We'll go over it with you and explain it for those who are having trouble. And by the chat tonight, a few people, having trouble understanding what we're presenting to you. And this whole thing is not meant to beat you up. It's meant to give you relief. It's meant to help you understand the problem that you're suffering from. It's offering you a solution, and based off that solution, we give you a course of action to help you recover from alcoholism. No longer has to be your story. And that's why the book says the story of, right? So if you want a new story, these are the simple ideas that we put into practice and application, and they've only been found in the first portion of this book. In my experience of suffering from untreated alcoholism for 15 years in and out, I adopted this way of life, and I'm over 2 years sober now, going into my third year. So that's what I got to offer. Thanks.
And that's the hard part, because we're looking for the answers we think it is instead of what the answers actually is. A lot of us got to get retaught who've been in and out or been around a while to get back to book-based sobriety. Joanne?
Hey, Joanne, sorry, Tony, is he lagging on your side too? Because it was just, Tony, your computer is lagging, so it's like...
Is it lagging? Why is it lagging?
I don't know.
Tony, it's fine. Keep going.
Joanne.
Want to say nothing.
See what these people do to me? You see what these people do to me?
It's fun.
Yeah. Okay, you both paid. Joanne? Is it still lagging?
No, you're good. You're good.
Okay. So what I was saying was, no, go ahead.
Okay. Let's talk about some traditions now. Guys, thanks for everybody for joining us. With respect to our seventh tradition, which states every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. In keeping with this tradition, it is the responsibility of groups to support themselves via the contributions from its own members. Currently, we're experiencing an unprecedented situation in Alcoholics Anonymous, not just locally, but globally. And for the first time in our 85-year history, our fellowship is experiencing the suspension of our physical meetings. Of course, the response to this has been the creation of a lot of these Zoom meetings, Skype meetings, FaceTime meetings, and we've not been able to pass a physical basket anymore. You might ask why we need to keep contributing during this time. Some examples are many of your home groups are still paying their rent, even though their meetings are not convening. Your intergroup offices are still fielding 12-step calls. They're still redirecting current AA members to find online meetings. They're still distributing literature. Your local districts are hosting Zoom meetings, telephone remote community meetings, and providing a link to our area delegate as the General Service Conference is still a go. Your Area 79, sorry, that's our area, your area, General Service Committee is working to keep channels open to the delegates and board members to keep the big wheel going. And your General Service Office is still being staffed in New York City. They're still continuing to work to support all levels of service. Literature is still being distributed. Calls are still being answered. Online platforms are being maintained. Guys, all of this costs money. You're by no means required to contribute as a member of AA. But if you are in a position to contribute and you'd like to practice this very important tradition, there are ways to do that. I'm going to post a link to the contribution page for our General Service Office in New York. So if you'd like to practice the seventh tradition, send your contributions there, and let's keep it to our own self-supporting contributions. Thanks, guys.
And this week, read more about alcoholism, and we'll get into it next week. We'll get into it really good. Thank you for keeping an open mind and allowing us to come into your homes. Am I still lagging, or are we good?
No, you're good.
Okay, and you two will pay later. Thank you. May God keep you safe till we meet again. We'll close with a Serenity Prayer.
Sure.
Who's Father? What's the main ingredients to making this thing work? God. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Right on. Thanks for having us, guys.
Ken, thanks a lot.